you ran not one but two independent sponsor firms.
Right.
What is an independent sponsor, sort of macro, and then maybe define what you were doing, and is there a gap?
Sure. So in the easiest sense, we know what a private equity fund is. You go raise $100 million, you get 2% every year and management fee and 20% of the upside. That's a private equity fund. An independent sponsor is a private equity firm without a fund. So there's no sort of pot of capital dedicated, set aside for that firm. And so they raise capital deal by deal, which means if your deal's good, you should be able to raise the capital required for it to close. If you don't raise the capital required for it to close, arguably the deal wasn't good enough to clear the market. And in addition to all the other things you have to deal with during a deal process, you also have to deal with fundraising. And so independent sponsors operate very similar to private equity funds. I say one is the capital difference. And I would say as a result of the capital difference, of course, private equity funds have to return money to investors every 5 years, whereas independent sponsors don't have that strict constraint. And so they have the ability to hold businesses longer or shorter and be more flexible in that relative to their private equity cousins, if you will.
Where does an independent sponsor go to get the money? Do they go to private equity funds?
They can. So you can go to private equity funds. Some have sort of set up specifically for independent sponsors. I think there's one in Florida that actually gives you like a Porsche if you do a deal with them on top of your
That's great.
You can go to a private equity firm. You can go to a family office. You can go to your rich uncles, your friends and family. You can go a lot of places. I mean, I think capital raising broadly is just it's a scrappy exercise in understanding who is most interested in the thing that you're trying to do, which is at the intersection of you and the investment opportunity. So people who love you and people who love the investment opportunity are going to be attractive investors. So can you go to private equity? Sure. They can sometimes be a tougher group to please, right? Sometimes you might find it easier in more private markets. You may find it easier if you want to buy a bottling company. Somebody who made $1 billion in bottling might be a great person to go talk to about some money for a bottling investment. So
I love that point. People often ask me like, I got how do I do the fundraising part again? Like what's the 3 steps I do? And I'm like, no. And
it's not linear. This is like the engineer in me is like, I call myself a reformed engineer. I had to put that engineering guy to bed.
That's right. This
is marketing yourself. This is understanding interpersonal nuances. This is very highly nuanced communication. And this is putting on your big boy jeans, because you're gonna get 50 no's, right? For a couple yeses. And if you count the no's, you'll quit. If you recognize this one less no en route to yes, and yes is all you care about, then you'll keep going. So you just got to keep going.
I have another theory, Elliot, that I want to ask you about, which is I think that, I recently read that, the number one desired career path for MBAs in school right now is an independent sponsor. Okay.
Oh,
and
that's right.
I just kind of like slapped my forehead, because for me, it's sort of like saying, I've decided that I want to be an A-list actor. Like, in other words, I think it's easier to move out to Hollywood with no one knowing who you are and like your way up and becoming an A-list actor than, going out into the world and just trying to be an independent sponsor, right? Thoughts on this?
So there's a book on a bookshelf behind me that I use as my example in situations like this. So the book is entitled, "You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike at a Seminar." AKA, you can't teach a student to be an independent sponsor at a business school.
Yeah, you can't do it.
You have to go visit sellers in weird places like, Midland, Odessa, Texas, or middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, or that place in Maine that you can't even find on a map. And the stuff that you have to do, like looking back on it, business school is a good general place to learn general, sort of universally applicable business things. For a very specific piece of the market, independent sponsors, I mean, you think about the things that an independent sponsor has to do successfully or find partners to do. Source deals. Very hard, like 9.5 out of 10, right? Evaluate the 100 deals or the 50 that you get and actually pick the ones that are good. Very hard. Actually put an offer on the table that actually matches the seller's wants with your ability to finance and your desire to actually have the company at that price. Then take a look at a bunch of disparate pieces of information called financials and operating agreements and customer lists and try to put together a picture of what this business actually is, which is different than what it was marketed to be, if it was marketed at all, because in proprietary deals, you might start off with just tax statements. Then you actually have to understand enough about the business to then go to smart people with money and say, hey, I want you to put your liquid cash in this non-traded, unaudited private company with no liquidity for until I want to sell it long, and then I'm going to get you a big return. Look at it at the top right of this slide. And then if you do that successfully, then you actually have to go deliver on that with that person calling you once a quarter saying, where's my money? There's no class on any of those things in business school. Not a single one. Not that there's not things that are similar, not that certain businesses don't give you a glimpse, but it's just, to your point, an independent sponsor is a person who's pushed hard enough through sort of hurdles and doubt and failure and blown deal fees and being taken advantage of to say, I am capable enough to go execute a transaction on a private, illiquid business.
That's insane. That's absolutely insane. I'm reminded that the first time I got an offer for a company that I owned,
Mm-hmm.
I was not on the market, and it wasn't quite unsolicited because I was trying to grow through acquisition, and
Right. Yeah.
I called my CPA and I said, "Listen, I just got an offer for the company," and the first thing he said was, "Oh, Walker, that's great. Does he have the money?" And I think that this is the number one question that a broker is going to ask, a CPA is going to ask, an attorney is going to ask, a seller is going to ask, and the sponsor, there's actually another word for it, fundless sponsor, right?
And I would not allow people to call me fundless on the phone.
Yeah. So it's like you're not only getting that LOI in like sort of the Venn diagram of things that overlap between buyer and seller, you're also selling them on the fact that like you can turn around and get the money.
Right. And the money is oftentimes not yours. So the simplest way, sort of, here's my bank statement, doesn't work.
That's right.
So actually you're putting together a pitch to convince conservative, right, discerning people that you can do the impossible. Like, hey, I'm Superman. Yep. Can't you tell? That's what you're pitching. And then keep in mind, and if you get into this, you'll know that accountant, like your accountant is asking that question, knows that he gets fired when that deal gets consummated, more than likely. So people who seem to be well credentialed and their reputation is high as it should be, have a bias in this process. And that's something that I deal with a lot and help people see, is that sometimes you need to understand the angle and the motivation of the people who are giving you certain data pieces. Otherwise, you'll be listening to smart people that have an angle tell you things that may not be in your own best interest.